Good morning, everyone. My name is Bobby Sager, and just to take 1 minute to introduce myself since I have not been here for the previous session. 13 years ago, I stopped working as a businessman and took my small children, age 8 and 5, out of school, and with my wife and children started to live around the world in different difficult places to try to help people.
ngada ge imbiki ene chuguni de labda ma kongba shuche ene ngara anta kime da nangminyam do zambulinki ene sane jik kange yosa dawal chinche an del yobe kimi manso lata pendo che ki lega che ango chuguins.
So for 13 years helping people has been my full-time job.
cheza ta dingel nga chongba indu zambala chongbe ki lega di shache ta lojong sum sringa la nge lega di ene mimang la rokba che di nge lega cha di yus.
And I want to thank Geshe Lakto, and Bryce for inviting me to this conference.
So I'm
going to start the discussion with a question from the audience that I think is very interesting, must be from a student. The question says, usually, we say that our mind is responsible for the control of our whole body. But in some cases, disabled organs are replaced by machines. So in these cases, how does Buddhism describe the control of mind over that machine?
네, 당아도 남배원이 차샤빈다 또 류가 있으면 탐제나네 또 아니 이디 차대요래 아니 이게 당진디 간데시거를 라빈데 삼류기 삼루세 대가란 속에 아니 이들한 대시적요래 딘자 류기 제백인 조단 탐제 삼류기 구제제네 아니 로데기에서 가지고 딜런 대시 텐덴지 개 띵 서부지 개여데 이내야들이 배지 되게 드리면도 삼산도지요
제와디 단다 추제들다길라 추제들 수고 그 차시 차대요와 다 남규 그 샤다 루고 수고 그 차시되다 왕규르고요 차샤 다 추제들 기란 수고 그 차시 차대요와 단다 다 딜레베 컨데스 왕규르그레스 요르다
알레 디 단다 추제게 건조게 셰바나시 레자딜라 데네스요르데나 레제기 제긴 조감디 가족이 단다 룽감 도당지 시요레 가르시거를 라윤데 잠바라 룽갑소 아니 짜이남라 아니 차디 규제제고 그랬어요레 차딜라 수규제제고서 룽딜라 심기 규제제네 도당지 시요레 제자 추제기 때문에 아니 단다 가르사고 네 렉자데 좀 도당다 심칸 도당데서 랍데디 조딩 아주게 심기 아니 차야말 되네 구주르 제베기 경제라 되네 배지 되네 레자들라 포 레자 디기 더블 된데 배지면로 삼선으로래
남주 원보디 가서 공주르 제투고요와 베나소즈 류기 차시고 원보지 교 효로이나스 남주 원보지 마쇼로 갑라타 코 샤다 리바타 카리나디 심기 땅진 치기요르세 코타 세보드 경에 케마도아스 다이네 류지 차시게 왕부지 교현쇼네 디찹들 메힌지 쪽해 요나스 디주샤죠 메힌들라 삼로게 당진 컨디치그레스
맞추 셈 거왕 전두고 라야테 ngatu khorwa tang myangdi tang ra jechesa ni lak yorela ani ngatu churchi jika tangden chiate kansak shep chakwa chigla nikkabrang la chiag chapar terela.
They are not understanding the caution. So that's the problem. They're just giving in a wrong direction. So the gela did the gela so. Pesha shana kema thola do zambala. Ani cha kema chlu shana lega chi worda. Lega chi worwa. Ta namgyun kema desha da thai do zambala cha du re tha du yore dilebe ki chik chi wor sen dig yorwa. Ta cha dina la tha du re khar chi wor ta di cha de sem ki ani kan tangsin khandes chi yor dig sho da ta degree.
Kewa number na kundu dem rev kun sam to the drache ane tan khema la jew jaw na ra pumal jew jana ran troja mambuji gar ki yorwa tel sem ko tanjin kar che go yore se onde tenri gun troja te da o te chu ke che se le kawar te le ba chal te ne kun troja gande se go zu yin wa zu yin le ba tel tanjin sem ke che yore le ba la tanjin sem ke che te ne le ba ke troja la tanjin che che tene kundini kora chik jab chene tene wena tene rotan chagu mi rote.
So ultimately he has understood the caution and we have the answer here. And so it doesn't matter whether it is a machine, a leg or a kidney or whatever, since the movement of that machine is controlled through your nervous system. And we believe that the nervous system itself is controlled by our consciousness or the mind. And so ultimately, like any other human body parts, that machine is also indirectly controlled by the mind.
That would have been my answer too.
So this is a related question. It says that Eric had talked on neurotechnology, and he showed this technology connecting the neuron and the machine to work something like something like an implant. Maybe this is the same question. May conflict with Buddhist perspective. So my question is to Buddhist scholars: do you share his perspective on an implant? So I think that was the answer, maybe.
Almost same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything on that, Eric?
Well, maybe I can sort of reinterpret that question. Is there anything in Buddhist philosophy that contradicts the use of such technology?
Chisa di tiwa di daw daw cha yung gudwa di kharis labna gen eri kurang tanji tamshi nanglo la ani jiga subun gume cha yung ya da de wang bu yin la de kyön shor yung du zambala ani denzu ki ani chawa di ani tuji ji rokwa che che ani ngazo che de yung yo ro ta tanji ke che she wanang shi daw re ta de tiwa di ku ta mandaw jik thon ku bi na ani de ki ani jik tuji la ani ngazo rokwa che che tuji de ani ta kangwa da lakwa dendu sabla pheju chi yung du zambala di nangbe ki ani ta drup da yang mena nangbe ki ani chikta chim ku rodan denzu da gi yo re wes gewa ke yo re wes ti yor ta
ta dan dana pepe teni ji gehi laddo la zubi ga teni tsama lan thangwan tsam ta ji dele hi ge teni ta ombu yen la de da thang ji jun hyo lo du teni da sosu gu zubi cha hi mai bi jala yamba ji ge tin tsap se na ngada kare yo re se la te twa te ra wa o nombi gi yo ne o te ngada kan yo ma re se ni ya yi jidang ji ngaro tsongo ta komba me jujina ji komba khaya me jujina juba la den rogo ra o te juba de tombo tangzi senge de ngaro tsong khoro gu samno ji gonglo gu seng ma tangzi se de go ra te zo de del tengawa kong mun de training ngaro de samsin.
So from Buddhist point of view, there's no contradictory or there's nothing against the Buddhist principles by using these kind of machines to help us. For example, traditionally we use walking stick to help us move around, and so it's just a more kind of a complex walking stick kind of thing.
Tela ngarong gu te to jan yamba na pena ngaro to ga lapa te hipare lagi mare te ya lapa ya mang gichu tong diwa te kare jene jodo seng tong se lo ra te ga no ji de jala yemba go tin sap se chu de se ni hai.
So that seems the walking stick is also the movement ultimately controlled by our body, our mind. And if we are controlling any machine, it's just like we are controlling our normal hand.
And what about if we look not at a machine, but at the concept of artificial intelligence, where the machines are able to learn and to solve problems and so forth? What would they say about, what does someone have to say about the Buddhist idea of artificial intelligence?
Chesa that tiwa shimba chik dida dawuch kubi bina thanda manzuki any artificial intelligence sidu sambal thanda chika mi ki any suesha ki tuje dinzul anjik ta tingsa rikba changbo changyo shoro kunzuki chika zi kor tobya ani yaman dro tobya lega mangus che tobya ki any ta niwad le ingures chesa dinzuk thola ani nangbek ngone tebi bina ani deshi khandes kya gures
다티 토라 나롱 그 삼천다고 지키 이제 지동 나롱 디 첫째서 그게 로종세라 되게 강요세 많으라 지 이나요 지동 진람다 세가나다 잘라 몸부지 슬르디데라 레게 얌바지 세트고래 그나 나로도 콤바지 잡고고나 도찌 콤바지 고 말아와 이나 도 몸부지 초 가와도 토가도 몸부지 초고도 나로도 대사도 지 가라다 진 손든 초사기 되는 그 자원 뭐부지 세트기도 와 내가 노기도 주 흘리 hinge지 디나 네바데 되는 셔야 요래지니 셔야
I do not have much knowledge about the workings of these machines, but I would say that normally when things come together, if you combine parts together and form a new entity, that new entity can do many things. There are many qualities in that entity which is not present in the parts. For example, if you look at this building, when you put together all these stones together, and then we can have this big hall, and in which we can have meetings and held this conference. But if you look at one particular piece of stone, they don't have that kind of quality. So there are somebody who can who have proper knowledge about these machines, and if they put these parts of the machine together in a kind of a right order, then it can have it has the potential to do many things that the parts parts cannot.
Could one of you just describe for the scholars sort of your definition of artificial intelligence?
I can take that for now. I did study artificial intelligence as part of my training, and it was really defined as trying to build a system that can perform certain types of cognition, if you will, like transforming information from one type of information to another. So, for example, one particular application of that's very popular now or very widespread is computer vision. So you can train a computer to read, basically, in that, to recognize certain patterns in an image or even text or language. And then through another program, even understand, so to speak, language and make sense of certain propositions. So it's all very mechanical, and then there was this question back at the beginning of artificial intelligence, whether any of these machines could ever become conscious. And I don't know if, well, we're certainly not at the stage to build a machine that would be, that would have that kind of quality, but the question remains theoretically whether it's even possible in principle or not. And so some people think it is, some people think it's not. It's very much a divided opinion in the field.
chik dende ki tanda ani kyume ki eta rigze sigionere artificial intelligence ya di kharchag yoris la bimbina ani lega yudo ki ani lega chera pa chik ani chetobya ki niba yunge chikla ta artificial intelligence ya di sigioris chezata dende ki yudo ki ani chawa che sidu sambala an khar sigioris la bimbina ani mala chik nanglo la ne chik ne shemba chikla ani ne zu pa 동암 소 렘바체 투구 요빈베나 디기 유도기 자와체 투두 시기어레스 제자다 딘데기 자와디 팅상 안조 안 컴퓨터 라소 단다 딘주키 아니 딘데기 자와디 체 투구 요레 대가나시 아니 컴퓨터 키 아니 치 비슈네 통제 키 자와레 두sam발라 아니 치 이기 로토비아다 이기 칼라간좀 고츠 체 아니 디기다 렌갸요 딜라 두sam발라 고 케다 kin rotan di kalakangam khunju lega che tu guyo tengu yores yimbina ta dende ki ane neju tongle ke tone ane yudo ka chawa che tumpa tsam ki ane dila ane sheba yorwe smarwes like tiwachli yores ta sheba yor marwe yore mare schedule khala yores labi bena dende ki ane chawa chewa di 징에 컴퓨터 코랑킹에 자와디 지구 요삼야기 ane lo di shartu guyore ha guyore be mare sigyor ta dende ki niba de yore mare se dusambala di ane chobares tha dine thande chala ane dine sheba yowe ki ta khara tuji ji dik top yo mare de nimena gima ane top sigire sinye da sig mare sinye ki rik mangbocha di yores ta digol thanda ane ko nyamshim roshi be ki ane design shag yores.
So, just as a follow-up, do they believe? So the scientists are having an argument back and forth about maybe artificial intelligence could contain consciousness. What is their belief?
제가 근데기 아니 주제 된줄라 아니 다 셰바 요메 된 세리 바주기 아니 쪼바 차디 도스 견라 키란 주기 아니 대시 컨디스 얘기레스
제가 시바 센도 제티 나토 그 매근 올는데 네제 또 좀 해도 요리데 요마르스 진남발 람산 리지 잡고 시라 칼레카운도 차딘도 제조 그 고조 그 벤즈 지히인도 된다운도 차딘도 이마이나야 다들 제가 나쪽에 파르시시아데 뱀스바 가사 칼 드롭 초와레 베데 자잘레나 돈다고 이제 마코고는 지말 뭔도 리딩도 테 파르시톤 파르시스 가사 칼 톤도 오 딘디게 레이스 줘봐 가힐 드롭시그리 이나야 다다 메신게 되니 바제 얘기 론도고난다 가리나 만다서데 메일레 발티니 피나 제조 만다고 차am 잠리 마토 바게 미니가 주고 주부 샤타 드바나기 신우삼로 동데 지진도와 딘디지 드롭토 마레스 이나야 저다 파신도 파롤라 딘디 흉시바 타리 마토 딘디게 남긴도 히바 열슨 테요 마레스 휴
Since we cannot show mind or the consciousness as a physical object, so it is really very difficult to precisely, decisively say that it can have this conscious awareness or not. So when we talk about the consciousness, it's like the dark energy or the dark matter that is you are talking about in the physics. But sometimes when we talk about the intermediate life, and we say that in intermediate life you can have a conscious sentient being living in innate objects like rocks and these things. So if you think from that kind of perspective, then it is to some extent possible, but it's obviously different from the conscious sentient beings that we have known to us, like with flesh and bones like us. But it's difficult to say ultimately.
Okay. Is there something that either of the three of you would like to say about, from your exposure to the Buddhist scholars, what science? I know this is a very broad question, but you sort of take it wherever you want. What science has to learn from Buddhism, how it can benefit and better serve mankind?
I just want to say it in one sentence. I think science is not the end, it's means to an end. And where the contemplative practices would take us is what the end is. That's all I want to say.
저다 게나고랑 디워드 카르구스 라빈베나 아니 지금 저단 세링스야디 아니 콜롬산 자쳔보지드레 되니 힘비나다 디 낭로니 지금 낭버츠 산니 아니 지금 강아요와다 샤요베케 아니 롬산 로디 카르카차 요레스투 런티와쿠소 저다 디워디 랭겔라 모랑 칼라스 라빈베나 아니 세링스야디 아니 타 나줄로 요와 탐지 아니 세링 마레스 저단 세링스야디 아니 takharelo ngazu thamik mi rodi lepsa rodi chagyo mares chata jike yudo ki ta komdum nyamle nang she sha gyodun zo an ta ko taduk mi ru chi cha gu yore do chusumsta.
I think for me, and this is my third time interacting with this group in different capacity, and perhaps it's not so much content, but it's a way of reflecting back on what we do. And furthermore, I think it's my observation about the joy that this group has for learning. And I think that's something that I can bring back and incorporate that into my own teaching, is the joy of learning that I see when I come here.
제가 나란도 신비나 안에 델레체 아니 기누바츠 냠둘라 안 두슬레가체 데 팅마 숨바차디 유스 제자다 공주단 가리장 신송세드 잠발코 지가 낭동 기차니 아니 저다 아직 대신송세 된 자외찬 매빈베네 아니 신요 직 가르두슬라빈베나 아니 지가 삼노당당 저로 도주 지당 디다 만다 샤디 요레스 제가 나시 아니 지가 델레가 셴바지 카르차이 두슬라빈베나 아니 코란수 아니 롭종 제베 갑슬라 아니 롭종라 제야라 아니 towa시우지 요데 체요레스 제자다 디 롭종 제야다 아니 롭티 제야기 towa디 아니 게 두스파키 진체 아니 나랑기 펠이야 아니 다 롭티 제베 갑슬라 아니 다 페주 제데 체요스.
Could I now ask if there is some questions from the geshes for the presenters?
gelakhiran su tanda tamshi chingye su tiwa yuna
oya nga to ji de nanda ga lapa ta menzo ya ta ani shirap ya che menzo ya ta ani lapa implant jambo tanda chi ya da tsama pe ye ho hansa ngom char chiwa tanda res tanda ina nga chu jamlang ga nang ka kangar cheshude 뭐 반성 그 지그지그 다 지그지가 초로와지고 난자 다 지그지가 인치나 케렌 잠보라 와다 지그지가 데 지그지그 고르다 맘추야다 커뮤니케이션 내가 지그지가 안디 다 지그지그 초로와디 똥 마트야다 아니 데니 지그지가 다 케렌 지 마트야 다티 강가르된 가서 너무 반성거나 있나 요리 촉박 반성거나 있나 요리 아니 챕터 바당 아니 성막거나 같은데 요라 된다 요는 그 가서 그다직 너르구스 챕터 그 같은 성막다 소수 너무 소수 결합대 쪼지니 아니 잔다서 티 파라와치야 다때 가서 미 시까지 그래야 Otela yargi tantap tanda michiaga tanda garmenzo ya tang ani alapa implant chia tang tanda yung sikre da sikumare tanda la tanga samlo tang yo orelawi.
So when you talk about brain transplant and intelligence pill, these are kind of wonderful things, and so in purview of this kind of information, I would like to ask a question. And the bigger problem that we face in our daily life is the gap of communication and communication between at a personal level and also at a political level, social level. And also there's a lack of understanding and the care for each other. So can we have kind of through intelligence pills or through brain transplant or the part of brain transplant, can we have a situation where when we can have better quality to communicate better and have better relationships at different personal and social levels?
Well, first, we cannot at this time do a brain transplant. And even transplants of small pieces of tissue into brain are not very effective, and it's been tried and has not been very effective. So from a practical level, at this time, it's not very good. But I think perhaps we don't need to look to advanced technology for some of these communication problems. I mean, perhaps, and Geet may be able to elaborate, maybe it doesn't require these technologies to solve some of these communication problems. Perhaps it's just more a behavioral change and a different way of thinking. And perhaps we don't have to look to advanced technology. Maybe you can elaborate.
I was just thinking, just in case, hypothetically speaking, even if brain transplant was, could happen. I mean, can you imagine going to your neighbors and say, excuse me, because you don't talk to me nicely, you need to get a brain transplant done. I don't think that's going to be possible. Anyhow, what you said, Dr. Eric said, was absolutely right. I mean, for something like communication, which is a very basic need in human beings, and is something which is more behavioral in nature, and it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of why you need communication, what are your needs are, what you feel, and what is important to you. I mean, if I feel talking to my neighbor is important for me and it gives me something, so I will go ahead and do it. So I think it's very personal. But it's very correctly said, yes, the interpersonal skills, or the way we are right now, it's so competitive. And, so everything is mine, and it's not for others. So it's individualistic, yes, but it's also a cultural thing, it's a societal thing, it's it's where we are headed with whatever changes, technological changes or scientific changes or whatever changes are happening. I mean, I don't think it's, anyway, that's a personal thing. That's it.
Tamungil gela kurangi kar lenkyun slabi bina ane thande gichala chidang kurani ane ta leba thanda transplant sabyo tab siro chigna koje ane shemba dile tabya di ane chetu yo mares cheyaki thanda ane turi ki ta che de yo mares leba chasanda pasha ani din anglo ni chikta nganzu tissue le phungrup si yo tinde chinju dinde ko che ani pha symbol garia dinde ani thanda nganzu lamno ya ko chungu yo mares ani tsawe chani ani thanda ji ke mi pensu par ke dewa mindu se ya wo mindu se da ani jizo pensu par dewa ya wo mindu se dinzula ani leba tsabe tab go ya dinde leba gyu gya go ya dinde ke ani chag yo mares sam gudus 제가 안에 등조 카레스 라미베나 안에 코 디마임베 시규단 대화 교배기 아니 계제스 차디 교래 제가 안에 시규단 대화 교배 직다 파주 계제세당 다 등조 돈다 종달 제고에 내주지 차기 얼마도 다지게 레버 교육에 다든데 돈 강에 세고에 강에 차기 말에 송스러 아니 대가는 게 기트 칼송스 라미베나 레스 강에 등조 아니 레버다 등조 교육에 아니 강에 세야 레버지 말에 스페셜 비비나 키라 통바침제 나와 루메 비비나 통바침제 대자 친정아 키라 나와 루문도 키라 레버 교육에 실라야 요마르와스 제가 등조 카레스 라비메나 아니 직시제기 간주기 아니 타 룽아 이숨기 남규된다 근데 네주 차디 요르스 제가 다디 카왈 근데기 아니 룽아 이숨기 남규된다 디 안 탄다 게랑 키랑 라원나시 엔지 강이 요 근데지 칸데스 차브레스 라비메나 디직 단데기 간주 지조디 아니 가조로단 칸데스 이메다 디가나시 아니 간주기 지조로단디 아니 칼차디 요르스나 펜주 아니 직 게드 니르체 아니 직 데주 직 톨도 데야 지조 가조 차디 요 송상 아니 강에 된소 용버레스다 다 된소 교와 담에 토네 아니 강에 세고에 그릭 차디 요레스.
I'm sorry, would you like to ask a question?
ngala chwachi yo teni dari dagyan nomba ko zo londo ko toni ma kalo nore rawa londo ngazo tiende dela teni ngaro zong ko nombi ko toni da londo shedong ji do cheribi ko toni londo shedong nam ni yo rawa tiende da nomban da wo ji je do ngaro zong ko zawa di gari tu gor jena da nyomu tu ngase o tela chi ngaro chung mandiba yon desa chason de tere la gore ta pena tin de tela ta ndosha ta bjin de meba se la thaki kar gugre se na ngaro chung ga yi mudu ba gani meba se gugre la gore 대가 나오기 때 해당다고 지데 ngaro chung ko ronjel che de na te meba se la kar gugre zena shamba gang gugre la gora teni ngaro chung ko da mahi be mamba tumi gu teni gi sande we china te meba se la kar gugre zena tendi gang gugre se ni da ndona nyomo ba nga yo ro ta te nga ga ma chi la na pe na nga jan da we china nga jan te meba se la da ye je wa gang gugre la gore teni chadun duwa chadu de meba se la kar gugre zena da ye nyamba gang gugre la gore o ta te khuru gti tsawa ge nyomo ba yunsa ge lo te do ngada chi be lo chi ge ko meba se gugura ten de la ta ngaro chu ge chason yunsa de tsawa da bo ti ngunzi te se ni ngaro chu ge khoi ge dunga se kana da nasa se kana da mandi ba chason de la te ni yudu te la te yunsa ge tombo je de meba se gugure zeme tin jebit me ka thu maro ten de tseri bala tendrigum ngaro chi chuchu no la montoba mamboji yon devate meba shebe gata di ngadar chi bega chi tha kariyo resi ni ngatwa te teribito te lata kariyo resi ti meba shal.
Today's topic is how to act. So when talk about how to act, then we can give a Buddhist perspective on how to act and how should you be acting. And then also we can talk about the scientific point of view about how it is best to act. And in order to know how we should act, then we have to know the root causes of the problems that we have. And we believe that there are 5 poisons, and basically 3 poisons. Five poisons, which are like anger, attachment, and self-grasping, and this kind of negative mental states. And so in Buddhist traditions, when we talk about morality and ethics, we talk about eliminating these negative mental states and how we eliminate this negative mental state is to adopt the antidote of these mental states. That is, if you have attachment to some objects or a person, you have to meditate on the antidote of that mental state, which is to see that entity in ugliness of that object or the person. So in our tradition, we have a system to how to eliminate these 5 poisons, and to that way we can have a better morally kind of lifestyle. So from scientific point of view, do you have this kind of methods to deal with these negative things? Do you have rules for how to act or morality?
I think the goal of science was never to provide rules of behavior or morality. As we have discussed earlier, science was this very agnostic process of gaining knowledge about the world and has historically tried to stay clear of ethics and morality. And it's just now some people are proposing that science may be able to contribute important insights into morality. There's schools of scientists who are trying to do that. It's very controversial because it's not clear that this is the way to really know what to do. So I think for that particular question is exactly one of the cases where contemplative practices have probably more to offer. And that's what Eric was saying, is that maybe that's where these traditions can really contribute to science, is to, help us define, what is good and bad, how to take personal responsibility for our research as scientists, and so on. So I don't think there is an answer in terms of science, in terms of how to become a moral person.
제가 가산이 있는 간주 계좌 셰데버 와스 생릭시야디 에네 당문 고츠도 고란니 에네 미유 간데직다 람가 간데지는 고츠고레 슬라메메나 통주스 처베 진직된 감디게 에네 네주 신도체 삼직이 에네 타블람 토라 진유 잠발라 아니 디게 에네 직 상주다 데베게 에네타 팀딘데직 데체오 지나 초르다 데체나 초 마레스 지오 마레스 임베나 아니 다 단다 거알레 융구요레스 라비메나 오다 딘데 아니 직 랑도르기 가조 가야 메와 직 토니 아니 네주 셴도 삼게 예수니키 아니 로디아디 아니 디우민도세기 아니 게제긴 삼직라 레체다 데 단단 생리키 아니 소데기 낭로라 아니 투두 롤링도 심베기 아니 주시직 차기요레스 디가나시 안 딩게 고랑키 아니 송소와스 제자 디는 삼발라 아니 직 낭주 라소베기 아니 직다 nang samlu ki ene ta rekbe ki shunglu tenzu ngene ene jikta sene ki chogdela ene jik logi thobya ki nezu logi raya ki nezu yobi benadi ta langdur dan dewe ki ene ta jik lamdu kajo te di chadi yores.
And that's not to say that science does not have any rules at all. In fact, there are very strict rules of behavior for scientists to have. But I think that what science has done is actually raise more moral and ethical questions for others to contemplate on. So I think that science has raised more questions than it has actually answered with regard to ethics and morality.
제가 딜레드 잠발 양 안엔 세리 세주 잠발 딘 알론 틱주치 메오 딘데 레베세나 마레스 카르치지요 마레스 제가 안니 콘세릭 나로라 안니 직 시주 디 아니 디체나 초레 디체나 초 마레스야키 아니 딕주 딱지 제단 딕주 요 디기오레스 제가 딜레도 잠발라타 세리 타 딘데키 아니 딕주 치고 오네 아니 세리 딱지 제지 아니 좁든지 니 용도 잠발라 좁든지 니웨게 경쟁 때는 양 대단 제웨게 양 안직 랑돌키 케체 망부치 레용기오레스 제가 딜레도 잠발라 고 세리키 낭로라 아니 랑돌 단제베키 니주디 아니 레레 아니 티와망 차디기오레스.
So there's three questions here that are very similar. I'd boil it down to say, what is consciousness from a scientific perspective?
제가 디 티와숨 시두스 제가 티와숨 상만 자우 돈다우 예베 경쟁되는 게 아니 투몽 찍도 소제 티와도 그게 제가 세리 배응원에 때나 아니 셰바세야 카레스.
Okay, I'll give my best understanding at this point. This is one of the hottest debated questions in science. So there is no current answers, although there's many proposed ones. There's different views on this. Some, like we have seen, I think in the past couple of days, like Damasio will define different levels of consciousness from proto-consciousness, which we would share with very, very small basic animals, to core consciousness, which is really just the experience, like our subjective experience of whatever is happening at the moment, to autobiographical consciousness or self, which would be the history of what has happened to you and your memory. That's just one current proposal, but there's no real way to test that. It's not exactly like it's a scientific theory. It's more of a hypothesis, if you will, or even a conjecture. That's the one that I feel personally the closest to, because it makes more sense to me. There's been other attempts to define consciousness as information, for example, as we heard from Raj, or other things. So there's many ideas out there, but I think what's very hard is to design an experiment that will be able to test any of these theories right now. We're kind of stuck because we don't even know how to begin to test it. So we're okay with saying this is still an open question. And I know you guys keep asking us the same question, how do you define consciousness? And we keep saying, well, we can't really define consciousness, and that's really frustrating. But that's really where we're at right now. And I think we just have to accept that we need more research and we need more time to figure it out. So we'll leave it as an open question.
제가 단다 셰바세디 카레세 저와 제가 디 단다 세릭 나룰라 아니 타마주기 티와직 차디요레스 제가 아니 임비나 셰바세디 카리메 콜 아니 삼주 망부시 시기요레스 제가 아니 지가 samtu shedan chik nanglo la sheba se di ani kerdan dire se sha me bin bina ani sheba chik deshi gyana mandaw ton ta rimba mangbu sha ton deshi gyana jures chik pesha sen ani proto consciousness le zambal ani ta zosim se chik da ningsim se chik ani rangnam kisim dilla du zamba khala yurs lamna ani chunchun ke wake up ne che ani chembo chaja ka padula ani chik shebe ki ani nezi di ani kompen ro du zambala denzu samal rimba manda shani deshi gyaran ji yores tigana shi ani sheba se di khare su du zambala di ani nezu ta chamchikla kogure se ki deshi gyaran ji yorina denzu sama thanda badu ani khanda manda ta di res ne tye ki ani taji chidab ji yomares cheza di medu zambala ani ta kiranzu ki takore tserik nanglo la ani sheba se ne khare sheben singi sho la du zambala nganzu ki shingi me singi sha me sla di sha di dus cheza di nu zambala ani di ki thewa denzu rig thanda nganzu changme ki ani len chö goya ki ani thewa ji chadi yores ola so thewa dini
toma del samala samti test li shwera tidata ane nge thewa di ani anda Geet la lera en thewa di khaina na khrong thangi tamshe na lo la khar sons la na ane pu din zo la char mongbo ane I love myself lan this ta kyarju chi chu yes to sung sa morangi ane ditu jamba ngara la namto ro khar chons la na di khesi di lao ina ane khachus phengi na khajena na di la du jamba ngara chona khar chons la na 소소 이 당진 디 체로 중에 딘데로 소스라 다 코란 냠뉴 첨부 여대 코란 기 딘데기 찍디 담고 금제 가리나 도시 계시대.
So my question is for the Geet. In your presentation, you said that you ask your students to repeat "I love you."
Lord, I love you. I love myself.
I love myself. Yeah. I love myself 21 times. 21 times. And so when you say that, I have a kind of a doubt came up in my mind because I felt that by repeating I love myself for 21 times may increase the self-grasping attitude. That means you become kind of a more arrogant kind of thing. And so how you define this?
Okay. I do this with my kids basically because what I felt was over time that, you know, I was out there to please everybody else, whether it's my work, my family, and the only person I was not being nice to, so to speak, and I wasn't really, being fair to was myself. So I would be very hard on myself at the stake of making people around me happy. So the only person I would look down on and be really hard and not be fair was myself. And then what was happening, you know, in the process was that because I wasn't intrinsically at peace with myself, so slowly over time, it just kind of, you know, I can be good with people around me only for a certain bit of time, because if I'm not happy with myself, I cannot, you know, non-stop keep making other people happy, because intrinsically I am not at peace. So when I started saying I love myself, it's just that it made me accept my own self. I'm not saying that I became a narcissistic and I said, my God, I'm the only person around who needs to be loved and so on and so forth. However, it just gave me a sense of self-acceptance, that it's okay to be me, and it's fine to be me, and it's great to be me, and from there, going on to getting other people, or reaching out to other people, because it gave me tremendous strength, or let me put it this way, much more strength to make a difference in the lives of other people, because I accepted my strengths and weaknesses, and it gave me strength to say that it's okay to be different and work from there. So it basically boils down to accepting myself, which I thought I wasn't doing for whatever reason, but I am on my way now.
제고에 경제 거를 투디스 라비미나스 로 아니 제가 안에 디 나랑 게르키 냠뇽 그 토네 아니 총대 기내 주치차기 유스 제가 당가나도 슬로망 보시는가 도스 레가 치제 도스 데디두 삼발라 아니 제는 탐만 삼노당 유두 삼발라 아니 예키 뮤직 나로네 아니 타 야부 마지스 세기 미지게 비비나 아니 탐마데 디 나랑 차디 도스 제가 아니 소수기 소술 아니 가오 마제두 and tama kharcha du du slab bena ani so so ani maji ya ki ani sam le yung yores chedan dil du zamba ta an jik dendel nga nga ran ga u yus ya ki ani keje du chik lab ju je ani so so dende thingma mo kyo ring du zamba la so so la chik ije da ani so so rangi ran ta chik gawa che dende do yung du zamba la ani shambala ya ani dende chik ta pendo che to da ani so ani jiga kiwro shitne yung dus cheza on dig to ne ani kabre jikta khalo da tende che ko cha dus ta nyamne is.
Is there a last question from one of the geshe for the presenters? So 2 more.
It number 수에 램프는 게요. 당아주 보고지 많이 것도 잘로 정말 도가이나 보고 잘로 정말 도가 보고 되게 멋지게 가쇼는 멋진 단어선아디 가쇼한 도와도 납쇼한 도와니 상쇼한도 소소한데 망이 왔지 그래서 뭐 땡아주 참여 받아서나 가래는 아주 좀 도모하지 이제 그래서 다이나 보고 되게 랑화데 보고 되게 멋진 단어선아디 마노라 시도 양나 지금 또 여바실라 람또 바다 양나 아니 특히 만나 깨치시도 양나 수디 수이나 가르치나 마티치 간지 나오는 가지고 남바이나 남빈 대시지 요래데 이 처리반 남바즈라 대 공스 가리도 되지 내년도 그러지 그치나.
So my caution is open to all the panelists. For a newborn baby, when he just come into the world as a young baby, so the future of this young sentient being is uncertain. Where he will go, where is so it's uncertain. So if there's somebody who will decide what this newborn baby will going to do in his life, if there's somebody, then who is that person? Is it his parents or teachers? And if it is his parents, then why?
My perspective is that nobody really decides one person. It's the nature as well as the nurture, the environment, and all the people who interact with that single baby. Everybody in some or the other way leaves its mark or influence it. So I don't think there is one entity which decides what will the child do when the child grows up, or where will he go in his life. It is also what the child is born with, the attributes a child is born with, and God willing, if he gets an environment, which is conducive to understanding his needs, then maybe he'll reach his potential. And it's a possibility that he might not even reach his potential because people or the forces around him do not understand him. So it's not one, it's an amalgamation of, or a combination of a lot of forces around him, whoever they may be.
Chazadadi any genki dire koki gures eki any zuzu such yomares. Chazadadi any rangyung sirota pusu any jiksusu lenjiki any tam nubada shitop da tiganashi any chicken kuriula sojon chitana ingala ralires. Chaza any chik pudela lenjiki any nuba kariyoa di any maunki any dulam kutula nuba cha sangma any Matun Siadi, any cooking Kurunang Yuveki, any Nedan Kandich, did a rally the Uris. Then Cabri, any Kurunang Yuveki, any meetings with the Tiganashi, Tajik Chaji, Masandu, and Kola Nuba Yova, and Sama, any Chikma, Tuanki, anything Jada, Kokap, and Ragu Maris, Cheza, and Kuru de Aburis.
And I'd like to reinforce that answer as well, in that, as you saw in the last slide that I had, we're all members of society, and these decisions will affect us directly. And so we're lucky to live in a society where we can all act as individuals to affect our governments, and unless we take action ourselves, we won't have those decisions to make, and somebody else will make those decisions for us. So I think everyone here, when you have the power to do something, you should take that chance and act the way you feel is right.
So this all Nimbeji Gavin Bina and Tanjing Tamshik, Tajiga, Shong Tama, the Zutami Nalola, any jiga chokde mangbu jikin dewa yobeki any nezu zotyo yores cheza dilar sambala tabya jila ngaran esi kin kuriu di any kari chindu yuwa kari che gowa di ta junge di any suchag yores lana ngara mimang ger susu chad yores ger susu ki any jiga chashi lensa yuwa chad yores cheza dilar sambala any jiga dela any susu ki ngoni any jiga nevek thoni thangju che thobya ki nezu jimbimbe any
So just to emphasize what Eric just said, people sometimes go through life as spectators, like they were watching a cricket match, where they're simply sitting on the side and have no control over what happens. And what Eric was saying is, you have to, as an individual, take responsibility for making something happen, for not simply being a spectator, for finding the opportunities to make a difference. And after lunch, we're going to talk about different ways that individuals can, in fact, make a very big difference in the world.
제가 들려도 선발 드나 게리 코랑 라바들라 아니 넘베스 캬비미나 안주 아니 니레 소외 그 나로라 까브레 안주 카르차그레스 카도 데구 요레슬라미베나 아니 테모 당겐도 차기 요레스 페차샤비미나 아니 케랑 키르게트 키 아니 테모 지글 테디요비미나 케라 테모 당게 디 키르게트 키 아니 테모 디 수토 마도다 아니 코아도 마도 세야 된조 아니 당지요 마레스 임비나 아니 네당 카시라 아니 nezu khare chung ma jung se di ani kirang tholang ge yu yore kirang ki ani ge yo na shi ani thaju che thubya ki ani khokab yor yung yores cheza dil zamata tanda nganzo ningung ki gyabla ani su ki ani ge ki che ani su ki khokab denzo ani thanglen chebe ke thone ani chik thaju chebe mena ani neba themba yung yorab ani tamchi yes
tene ngatwate arik chatalaye tene ta chwa de karen sin nga so semji choda soyena dewan du go da dunga mandu jibarwa ten de tingsa arik na lo la zade selen da ta tene sem ka kanga na samang bu jin jung yor selen do de on de ta luge benan tene so su pa ban ro go so ne ya semje me sa ya yorwa sem ka kanga la ta den de sa ya me ba bare me sa na tan ro se ke me on de ta de se ta thalan ro de Senebaga Kariki Yuris, Jajoga Ben Lebal Laws Jebsen Dogmina, that is set up Talandu Jigorwa, Dongano Jingazu Chapter New, the same Kanga said. This says Talamdo Jikaru. They do not the same Lebal Laws Jabara Lebar Horis. They own the Lebal Laws Jabana, not a Kuluba Laws of Saint Do, they were Mandur and the Chadi. They own the this is Karius Tala.
My question is for Eric. So normally it is true that all of us, we want happiness and we don't want suffering. And so in your presentation you talk about paralysis and different forms of mental disorders and the epidemic problems that is having in the West. In this context, so when we have this kind of problems or disorders, we can have suffering related with our physical body and related to another one that is related with our mind, our thinking. And so if there is a separate entity called consciousness, then how you are going to deal with the problems that is associated with this kind of physical or mental disorders?
Well, I didn't really discuss too many of the issues related to mental disorders like depression or schizophrenia or other types of mental disorders. But there are treatments that work for some people some of the time. Some of it has to do with medications to change brain levels of particular neurotransmitters. There are also many behavioral therapies to help change the way people act. And that's how we view success, reintroduction of these people back into society so that they can take over their lives and get jobs and work. A combination of both medical treatments and behavioral therapy seems to be very effective. And so the way that we measure that is by looking about how people act, and whether it's a pharmacological treatment or behavioral treatment. There are therapies that work, not for all people all the time, and sometimes multiple types of therapy have to be used before they find one that works, but there are plenty of choices to help people.
Jeda ani tanda simgam dan jeweki ani tanda nasa manguchi yorwas imina dezo kolangi ani jika ta jewa shemes pesashan da imuk nasa imbenere nyone imbenere dende kirik manguchi toas jeda da denzo sangma ani nganzu ngene ani ta jika jotab keja shen du zambala ani ko me teche ani jotab kirik jikda yang korang ki hiju ki ani Kua Tampang Tony, any Jotab Chegue, Rigni Uris. Jatamen do Stevena, men Teva, Dig Gumsen Chine, and Levekanalo, Chikwansi Timbala, so Tenzuki, any Tangzin, Kua Tangshe, any Sangam Koromla, any Jotab Chetubia, Tendich, any do Uris. Chezanta, Imbina, Dendeki, any Jotab, Duzama, and me Sangmek, Nalola, Nuva Jimsun, Tungu Yoris, and Tungu Maris, me Mandala, any Jotab Mandaki, any Pento chair in the Unguris, Chezadin to Zambala, that Jotab Yashudo, the Karcha Uris Labina, Mente, that Tiganoshi, Shijuki, any Tajik sort of Lagdachi, Ningetone, any Dutunguri, that Dutung do Mindu Siadi, any Candesta Uris Labina, any Dendeki Jotab, the Peju. Chesavek Jela, and never denzo, Majizo, now Yung do Zambala, Namanashi, any Namguta, Shijul, and Kiwata Dumindu, Dicton, and Senjiguris.
Can I add just one more thing? In fact, in terms of these interventions that science has been investigating, right now there's also an increase in interventions based on contemplative practices. Like I described yesterday, interventions like MBSR, and more recently, compassion meditation training are being currently investigated in scientific studies for their effects in healing some of these mental disorders, like depression in particular, anxiety, but also obsessive compulsive disorder and other types of mental disorders. So there is an increased recognition that contemplative practice can be used as a treatment for some mental conditions. So that's becoming part of science also.
Tiza tanda gen eri kurang ki lawa dila nembeshi gyabi imbena tanda ani simgam ki ta tukyo dinzu la ani nganzu tanda kasang gomda dinzu ki ani chotap dinzu yang pechu chigyo res pecha shabe imbena ani imuk naza do tigana shi sem goewe ki ani naza dinzu do imbi imbena ani chik tanda ije gomya da ani nyingje gomya dinzu ching du zambala ani pen tu yo res cheza dila du zambala ije gomya da ani nyingje gomya di seri ki dezen ki nanglo la ani simgam chotap ki ani tablam chik chadi yo res ta men ro chadi yo res.
Final question then. Just we're a little bit late, so just very brief.
Theory big da sani momuchi song da ngubo. Teda tangche ji lobi land mro wala metsan sebaton daron yon titolo yaji compétent ni ji sad tia di ji compétent ale deni kon ka chigresi kandri ka chigresi tanga sani son samba de lonla mro ba de ji songju sebaton.
So in science we have made a lot of discoveries and inventions and so which one is important? Is it more important to go after more discoveries and more inventions, or to try to prevent or try to direct what already has been invented in a kind of a better use, better way?
Make sure it doesn't go in the wrong direction.
This is a great question and very, very relevant to everything we've discussed in the past few days. I don't think it's an either or. Rather, I think that these have to go in parallel. Rather, new discoveries are essential for progress, yet when we look back on what's done, we can certainly make improvements on what's been done before. But as we move forward, we have to consider what is the right thing to do and what are the consequences of our action. So it comes down to what can science do versus what science should do. And those questions have to be asked at the same time. And then what should be done should not be asked after what can be done. Rather, what should be done has to be asked at the same time that initial science is being performed.
그래서 다 디니니 나로네 아니 디케체레 디케총레 세야기 아니 타주 제투 마레스 디니니가 아니 케체 보차도 요레스 아니 세리기 아니 니주사와 아니 사르도 제야다 아니 산니 중에 된조 아니 케침보레 디가나시 아니 냐마 산니 중사와 된조기 아니 가조 당지 지야 아니 케침보 차기 요레스 제다 딜라도 잠발라 가르리 요레스 라미메나 아니 세리기 가르체 투레다 야메나 가르체 구레 세야기 아니 제웨기 리직바 차기 요레스 제다다 가르체 구레 세야기 테와디 아니 가르체 토바디 락다르체 심베기 제라 테와구야기 테와지 차기요 마레스 제다 가르체 토 모톱다 가르체 구마고 세야디니 투주 찍라 레구야기 테와 차기 요레스 제다 냠도 로레스